Hi, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jan Moody, and I want to say thank you for joining us today for Edulastic Teacher Premium. I'm pretty sure that everybody can hear me based off of your messages in the chat before this, and I hope that everybody can see my screen as well. So once again, thank you for joining us today for Edulastic Teacher Premium. I'm also joined today by my colleague, John Kite, who just turned on his video as well. I work in marketing here at Edulastic, and John is in partnerships. So John, if you want to wave and say hi.
Hello, everybody.
So before I hand things off to John, we have just a few housekeeping things to go over. First, I just mentioned the chat. Please feel free to use the chat throughout the entire webinar to ask questions or add any insight or comments that you may have. The important thing to remember regarding the chat is to make sure that it is set to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your great commentary. Also, there's a little Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to use that to ask questions throughout the webinar as well. We want to make sure that this is a really interactive and inclusive event, and that you leave today with all of your questions answered, and that when you leave, you have all the information you were hoping to get out of the webinar. I also want to point out that today's webinar is on the premium features in Edulastic, so it will be kind of a more advanced webinar, and John's really going to walk us through all of the powerful things that come with an Edulastic Teacher Premium account. But if you are looking for more of a beginner webinar series or an hour about the basics of Edulastic and how to, create an assessment and assign it to your class and all of those more introductory level things, we have an Edulastic 101 webinar tomorrow. And that's actually at the exact same time. So Edulastic 101 is happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And hopefully Ileana can maybe share the link of how to register for that in the chat. And so again, just before I hand it off to John, here is kind of the plan regarding timing for today. This is our little introduction. And then John will give us around a 40-minute overview of all of the features available in an Edulastic Teacher Premium account. He'll kind of go over advanced reports, testing tools, anti-cheating features, scoring options, and then a lot more too. Again, it's just a really powerful and amazing tool. I love it. I know that everybody here at Edulastic loves it, and we are really excited to share it with you today. So I think that is all that I have to share, except that, again, please feel free to ask any questions you may have, and that at the end we'll have a designated Q&A time. So at this time, John, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to pass things over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jan. My name is John with Edulastic, the Edulastic Partnerships team. And on behalf of the Partnerships team, I want to thank you for attending this webinar. This webinar will cover Teacher Premium as it compares to the free version of Edulastic. So I'm going to stop my video, but definitely show some slides for you. So we'll go ahead and start with that. Let me remove this poll however I can here. And let's see. Great, excellent. So let me go into present mode here, and we're off and away. So everyone should be able to see my slides and hear my voice, and let's get started. So this is your guide to Edulastic Premium. So what we'll cover today, by the end of this webinar, you should be able to know exactly what is in Edulastic Premium. I'm going to provide a full overview of all the features within a premium subscription. I'm also going to provide a live walkthrough of the Teacher Premium reports. For those of you who use the reports that are available in the free version, spoiler alert, the reports are way more in-depth and detailed in the premium version. And so let's take a tour of Edulastic Premium via some slides, because there's a lot to show and they're kind of all across the platform. And this kind of will have the assumption that you do understand the free version to some extent. The free version, for those of you who haven't tried it, I definitely encourage you to create a free teacher account. It's unlimited in what it offers, this basic experience. It is really a good experience. And you can actually just go to edulastic.com, create a free account. This tour will begin where sort of the free version ends and kind of show what you can have in addition to what's available within the free version. So we start in the Manage Class area, and there's a couple options here that are enhancements within Premium. So you can add a co-teacher. In this case, you can add a co-teacher who would have full class-wide access to this Kite first period class at North Middle School. The second addition in Premium to the Managed Class area is the Enable Text-to-Speech feature. This is our read aloud feature, and it can be enabled for the whole class, as is what's going on here for this 7th period Kite class. Or you can go ahead and select individual students and enable text-to-speech or read aloud just for those students. Throughout the academic year, you can turn on and off text-to-speech depending on how it makes sense for you, for these individual students, or for the classes. You can play text-to-speech, and this is what it looks like from the student standpoint. When I see there's text-to-speech, it's kind of like just a green play button. That's what it looks like, and this is what it sounds like.
Choose the sentences that use pronouns correctly. A. Sam showed us athletes how it is done.
So anyway, it's powered by IBM Watson and a very popular premium feature. There are also superpowers. We're in the assign page. This is after we've created an assessment or we found an assessment that we wanted to administer. In this case, in Kite's class, he's administering to periods 3 and 7. And in the free version, there's no superpowers area. You just start seeing mastery criteria and things that exist in Premium down lower on the screen. But in Premium, there's an advanced options or superpowers option. So you have a lot more flexibility to configure the test exactly how you like it. And here are some examples of that. So you can shuffle the order of questions. So you have 2 students using Chromebooks working side by side. Unfortunately for them, and fortunately for the test security that you have, they're unable to really help each other because they're looking at the test in a different sequence. So there may be a 20-question test or 10-question test or whatever. The students are just getting those questions in a different order. Also, for multiple choice and multiple select questions, they can receive the distractors in different orders as well. There's also the ability to show a calculator to a student during a test. This can be particularly helpful if you have a browser lock where students are unable to exit the application. Within the application, you can have a student-facing calculator for a test if you want, and it's a test-specific option. So the default is no calculator, but you can certainly have students click on that calculator icon to see a basic calculator for a test, or a scientific calculator, or a graphing calculator powered by Desmos. And there's also Safe Exam Browser. We were just talking about browser locks, and kiosk mode for Chromebooks is a popular browser lock that's actually available in the free version. So in the free version, you can go to our knowledge base article, learn how to install kiosk mode for Chromebooks so that when students are on Chromebooks, they can't open up a separate browser window to leave the Edulastic application to go and find the answers on Google or whatever. And that's a great benefit of the free version with Chromebooks. However, if you happen to use Windows or Macs, then you could really benefit from the Safe Exam Browser option that's available in a premium subscription. And by clicking yes, you're enabling the Safe Exam Browser to work, and you can type in a quit password for students who need to leave the application for some reason. There's also the ability to require a password before students take a test. This is an additional security precaution. So you can require a password. The default is no password, but you can actually add a dynamic or static password. So what's the difference? So a dynamic password enables you to give students a specific code specifically to the class that you're now assessing. And as you're, you have this class in front of you, you give them a code that's several digits long, and you give them a time in which they can enter that code into Edulastic to start the test. You may just want 5 minutes, you may want 10 or more than 15 minutes, you can determine what that is, but it auto-generates a new secure password for every single class. If you want things to be maybe slightly more easy to use and you're not as concerned about security, at least on a class-by-class level, you can have a static password that's the same password for every single class that's taking the test. You just give them that password at the beginning of the class, and students can enter Edulastic. And then you can hide questions post-assessment. So to step back a second, what is available in the free version for post-assessment visibility is all or nothing. What I mean by that is if a student takes a test and they're done with the test and they go back into the test, in the free version, as a teacher, you can allow them to access the entire test, including the questions and answers and anything written by the author as far as a solution, any feedback from the teacher. It's all available. Everything's available to the students. Or you can limit it so they see nothing. They see absolutely nothing as a student. What Premium offers is a hide questions option, which is a nice middle ground. You can actually show students how well they did on the test, but not show them those questions and answers and solutions and feedback, so they can't share with their friends who have yet to take the test what those questions and answers are. So that can be a nice middle ground that's available in Edulastic Premium. And then we have a paper-based test. So you can use this option when you want to administer a test on paper. And what happens is when the test is done, you can manually enter those scores into something we call the Express Grader. And you can enter the score in, and with certain question types, you can even enter the response in, like a multiple choice question or something like that. So the Express Grader is also helpful to kind of view quick class-wide trends. Of course, more on this in the detailed in-depth reports live walkthrough, but this is kind of where the reports sort of begin in Premium above and beyond what's available in the free version. So within the live class board, those of you with free accounts will see a few things that are different already, notably the Express Grader, the standards-based report card area, and the Present button. So let's click on that Present button and see what happens. So we click on Present. We're in Present mode, so that's now shuffled all the answers down below. It's anonymized students. So maybe the student who was here is now there. They're called red dice, and they've been completely anonymized. This can be really helpful when projecting student work in class. So maybe it's a multi-step math problem. Maybe it's a detailed essay that a student wrote. You can, as a class, provide some constructive criticism, some analysis, and the student is anonymized. So the student, we don't know who the student is, which can be really nice not to put them on the spot that way. And so it can be a really helpful tool as, informative sort of learning. You can also, in the live class board, mark a student as absent. Of course, this is extremely convenient because then the student won't be able to take the test at home or wherever they might be. You can mark them as absent, and then they can go ahead, when they're ready to make up the test, you can redirect the test to that student. I mentioned the report card for every test. What people really tend to like about this report card is it's standards-based. So you have standards, performance, and mastery status that are available. In this case, I'm generating the report card, and I'm including everything, including question level analysis and performance bands. So that's what this would look like. The performance bands, question level analysis, standards performance as well. So I'm ready to print, ready to hand out those report cards for every single test in Edulastic for my students that are standards-based. And then within Edulastic Questions, there are also premium enhancements. So let us proceed and look at rubric-based scoring. So I can select from an existing rubric. I can select this rubric. I can clone it and make my own version of it. Or I can click here and create my own rubric. And as you can see from the interface, it's really quite easy, so I name it, I add criteria, and I add associated ratings. I click on the plus marks to add ratings, plus here to add criteria, and I can just build it out and save it, and it's really easy to use. I can decide whether to share the rubric or not. Maybe it's just something very unique to my class. I don't want to share it. Or maybe I want to share it across the district or across the whole Edulastic community for that matter. So I can determine what the sharing level is. And then I can grade with the rubric. And the grading is simple as adding drop downs. So in this case, focus and ideas was worth 2 points and word choice was worth 1 point. Right now, the way I have it scored is 3 points. I've added an optional comment. And I can actually click on rubric details if I want to see exactly what my score looks like right now for the student. Maybe I want to reread those descriptions I had and determine whether this score is accurate. So I can always revisit that rubric if I want. Speaking of seeing the rubric, you can determine whether students see it or not. It's totally up to you. It can be available for students, or it can be completely not available for students. Another premium question level feature is answer eliminate. So you can click on this X mark, little mark up here as a student, and then you can click those distractors that clearly are not correct. And this is really designed and modeled after end of year tests. It mirrors a lot of end of year state tests, as does a lot of what Edulastic does on purpose. And here we add a co-author to an assessment. So you can see on the right, I have the ability with this 7th grade math test to add a co-author. So I'm gonna go ahead and click add, and then it asks me to go ahead and invite that co-author to have access to this assessment draft. So I've invited the co-author. I can determine whether to send them an email notification or not. In this case, Miss Dash is going to get access and an email notification. So she would go to her assessment library. She'd look to where she's a co-author, and she would see that, yes, Mr. Kite has shared with her this draft for her to edit. And so then she would click on it, and she can edit and review the draft. And she can determine, okay, well, let's delete this question. Let's change the order of this. You know what, this question, I want to change it. I'm going to duplicate it, make my own version of this question, and then together we can decide which version of the question makes more sense. This is a huge time saver compared to the free version, because if you're sharing something to be worked on in the free version, you would literally have to publish it into a shared library. They would have to find it, make a new version of it, publish it again into a shared library. You'd have to find it in the shared library, make a new version. It's just exhausting to think about. So this really, really saves time and can really benefit assessment collaboration. SnapScore is the next premium feature that I'd like to talk about. And it's a paper-based testing option using bubble sheet scanning. So here we have this 3rd period class who's about to take this test. So we can generate a bubble sheet. And I chose this bubble sheet specifically because I wanted to show you that these bubble sheet tests can be hybrid tests as well. Sure, you can have true and false and multiple choice and multiple select questions, but you can also add manually graded essay questions to be graded later. So that flexibility is available within Edulastic SnapScore. So anyway, this is what a sample bubble sheet might look like. So how do I use SnapScore? Well, as a teacher, I would go ahead and download the free SnapScore Edulastic app. It's available on iOS or Android. So if I have a Samsung phone or an iPhone, I'll be able to use this. And so I go into my profile page as a teacher, and I connect with SnapScore. And the great thing is you don't have to know a new password or anything like that. It's going to generate a new secure password every single time. So I type this into the application, and then the SnapScore application goes into photo mode. And then I can just simply put the student's work under the phone. And once the app registers the QR code as well as what the students submitted, then all that work is going right into Edulastic, and that data is being imported. Of course, the only thing it doesn't import is the time spent per question, because of course, how would it know that? So, but it does pull in all the rest of the data. So you can have those great standards mastery reports, those great question level reports within SnapScore. And there's a final thing I'd like to talk about before reports, and that's Smart Redirect. For those of you using the free version, you may have used Redirect, which gives students another chance to take a test. It can be particularly helpful if there's an essay, they submitted a draft, you've provided them with some feedback, and now they're trying a second version of that draft. It's kind of like an unsubmit button though in the free version. And what I mean by that is students go back into that redirected test exactly where they last left it. So they can't really see what they got right and wrong, and they can see exactly how they answered every question as they last left the test. So with Smart Redirect, you can be a little more precise in how you want to configure that student experience. So in this case, some of the redirect superpowers are to show the previous response or not. Do you want students to see their prior attempt or not? You can determine yes or no there. Also, you can show the correct or incorrect feedback to students. Yes would mean that, yes, they can see whether they got things right or wrong, and they can see any teacher feedback you've provided, or no, they're not going to see that. So you can determine what they're able to see within Edulastic. So thank you for watching these slides. I'm going to go into a live demo of the reports, and then we're going to have some time for your questions. So let me jump into these reports.
Also, if anyone has any questions at this time, now is a great time to type them either into the chat or into the Q&A bubble, and we can get to those throughout. But just as John mentioned, we'll also have a designated time for questions at the end.
Excellent. And let me jump into the reports area. Should we wait for a minute for questions, or should we proceed?
I'm thinking it's probably okay to proceed. I'm not seeing anybody's hands raising at the moment, so go ahead and move forward. Thanks, John.
Oh yeah, anytime. I think that was about 20 premium features in 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
We zipped through that. We are having this recorded. This is Edulastic Premium as of January 22nd, 2020. For those of you who may be watching this recording in the distant future, some things may have changed, but that's where we are right now. And there's just a lot of great enhancements there. Possibly the #1 enhancement, or certainly the most in-depth enhancement, are all these detailed reports in Edulastic. So we have 4 of them. And for those of you who know the free version, this reports tab usually will have a link to just this view, this one view here, and then sort of I don't know what you want to call it, a commercial, something that kind of talks about, hey, have you considered Edulastic Premium? We have these great reports. Well, what it starts talking about in that little announcement there is what I plan to show you in this live demo right now. So in the single assessment report, it's basically a deep dive into every single assessment that you administer in Edulastic. So we'll get into the details of that soon. So what is missing from a single assessment report? Well, multiple assessments. So we'll have that as well. So there's progress across time for multiple assessments in Edulastic. Great for pre and post test to see student increases and growth. A lot of great information, and you can look by student subpopulation, all sorts of great stuff. There's the standards mastery report. I mentioned that this view is actually in the free version. There's also a slightly more basic view showing a standards performance overview just at the domain level. There's also this standards progress view that shows standard performance over time. So I'll quickly show you a view of that as well. And then here's a student profile report that goes into every single student in depth across their career in Edulastic. You'll be able to access all their work in there, as well as some really nice summary views of their progress and how they're doing on specific domain and standard level performance. So anyway, here's the single assessment report. So I'll click into there for that deep dive into a single assessment. And I'll click on benchmark test #1. And for benchmark test #1, I see an assessment summary. So it's a quick view. This is, if I just have a couple seconds, I want to see how students did. I might just go here and, then, review these reports later, but I can see how many students took the tests, how many were absent, what the average percentage score was, average point score, any performance bands, level performance that's applicable, as well as, a class by class statistical sort of overview. We move then to peer performance. So here we have 3 classes we've taken this test with. As a teacher, I'm thinking, oh, do I need to focus on any particular class for review? Well, maybe not really. In this case, this is a benchmark test that's part of Enterprise, so you can also see a district average. You can see that I'm kind of exceeding that. But I can kind of see how these classes are doing, as well as other student subpopulations, whether it's race, gender. Here's free and reduced lunch. So here are my free and reduced lunch students and how they compare to their peers on this test. And here's ELL. So my English language learner students did as well as their peers. So that's good. And then here's IEP. So we can kind of look at those IEP students and compare it to their peers in Edulastic. And there's ways to import this data that's pretty straightforward. And so then this next tab goes into question level analysis. So across all 3 of my classes, I definitely am going to focus tomorrow on these questions. And I can see, and you might wonder what is this orange line? That's kind of time spent. It's similar to the blue line in the live class board, but we can see time spent. So not much time was spent on this one. Students confidently missed it, or 40% of the time or so. So we may want to focus on these, and we can see more detailed class by class level statistics too. For example, this period 6 really missed this question 9. So anyway, you can get into the weeds as much as you want. I'll try to refrain from doing that right now. And then here's the response frequency. So we can see which question types were most challenging. Do we need to, really focus just on additional practice on specific tech-enhanced question types that we know are going to be on those end-of-year tests? Maybe. In this case, maybe not. These are all classic question types. But here, are there questions that didn't even meet this basic threshold of difficulty? Or with multiple choice, which distractors cause the most problems? For example, like, here, 33%. Which answers did students guess more than 33% of the time that was the wrong answer? So in question number 9, you can see that C is the correct answer. And you can see that A is an incorrect answer and a popular incorrect answer. So now as a teacher reviewing this single assessment report, I can not only see where I need to focus my time, but how to focus my time. And in the example of question 9, I can see how I want to spend my time. It has a lot to do with distractor A and showing students that this, don't be fooled by this. And I think it's revealing something that I can use to help inform my review time with these students. We'll move on to the performance by standards. So in addition to all those aggregate standards mastery reports, we also have a single assessment standards mastery report. So we can see which standards specific students are struggling with. And the great thing about these views is, like, whatever I click up above lights up, and then it shows down below. So it's really nice. And then we have performance by students. So we can look at student level performance. This test had 13 points. So which of my students didn't even get 7 points correct? So interestingly, they're all from my first period class. Here are their names. Maybe I want to target these students for remediation. And maybe there's some students that are doing really well. I want to give them more challenging activities or more leadership capabilities, whatever makes sense. You have the data, and you certainly have the teaching expertise to determine how you want to use this data. Those are my best ideas on how to use them. And then here's a multiple assessment report. So we can see progress across time. So I mentioned pre and post tests before. Of course, they're measuring apples to apples, which is a great way to use this report. In this case, I'm looking at benchmark test number 1 and 3, and we'll pretend that they're assessing similar standards. So in this case, we can see over time, we have a general increase. It's not a great increase, but it's okay. And then we have across different classes, 2 of my classes have increased. 1 has actually decreased slightly though, but that is sort of interesting to know though in this multiple assessment analysis. I can also look at student subpopulations like free and reduced lunch status and other groups, ELL learners, etc. And I can see that data across multiple assessments. So let's look at that. So here's ELL. So here's my English language learner students. Across 2 tests, you can see a pretty good increase for those ELL students. For those who are just their peers, they increased but slightly. So that was interesting. That's an example of an achievement gap being narrowed. You can also see that on the student by student basis. Of course, it's going to get more varied and interesting at this level because we can see that 14 students are progressing across time. You can see that 4 students, their performances remained basically flat. And then we have 12 students where their performance is unfortunately declining over the pre and post test, or test 1 and test 2, or whatever you're measuring. So in the case of, in these visuals, I think as far as the trend are really helpful to me, because I can see that Kelly Bay is not as much of a concern as maybe Connor Lang is. So for example, Kelly Bay, I can tell just by the visual that she started high and she decreased slightly. Where Connor Lang started at 75, now he's down to 50%. So I love how these trends, the visual display of the trends can really be helpful to have me focus in the areas where I need to focus. So anyway, that's the second report, the multiple assessment report. The third one I want to show just in one view is the standards mastery report. You've seen in the free version the standards mastery gradebook, but here's a new view. In fact, this is a brand new view that just came out a couple months ago. And you can see progress on any particular standard you want to see from the dropdown. In this case, I'm looking at this Common Core Math standard. And I can see that it's been assessed 4 different times across the academic year so far. And we can see student by student how they've done on this particular standard. This can be particularly helpful if suddenly a standard needs additional review, because we're finding that the most recent assessment is showing that students are suddenly struggling with this standard. And hopefully what we're seeing is increased proficiency over time in these 4 various, in this case, 4 various snapshots over time. So it's a great new view to the standards mastery report that comes with what you've already seen in the free version, which is student by student, standard by standard, a great detailed view of standards mastery. And then finally, there's the student profile report for each student. So there's an in-depth report that covers basically the entirety of the performance in Edulastic for every single student. So we'll click in here and we have student Aaron Hall. This is just a summary overview. We will get into the next view, which gets into more specific performance. In this case, we want to refine results just to see what we're looking at. This is actually from his ELA course last year. We can look at his math course from last year as well. Can compare it to this year for math, and he's also taking Edulastic for science. So we can see a lot of information, and down below we can see standard by standard, how is he doing? So in this case, we see that he hasn't mastered this science standard. Well, we can click in and see why, when was he assessed on these particular standards. And then finally in the student assessment profile, you can see, and let me go to math so there's a little more data. You can see assessments across time, and you can also see not only common assessments, but class assessments. So this can be a great resource when talking to the student, when talking to the student's parents, when talking to tutors. It just provides the full picture of this Edulastic journey of this student. I didn't really mention longitudinal information too much, but this definitely shows that student journey over time. I should mention the single assessment report and other reports. You can kind of look year over year. How that my fall quiz in October compare year over year. So those kind of views are also available. Another big advantage of premium versus free is free, you get the live class board and you have standards mastery, but it's really just showing one class. In this case, as a teacher, I can see all my students all together. So that can be really helpful too. So anyway, that's a quick overview of the reports and premium access within Edulastic. And I think now it's time for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, John. That was really amazing. There's so much to go over there, so I appreciate all of that. So everybody, please feel free to ask any questions that you may have either using the Q&A bubble or in the chat. And then, John, are you finished sharing? Should I take back over again?
Yeah, please go ahead and take over again.
Okay, awesome. I have a few more slides to show everyone. Awesome. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, and I will start my video back up again. So again, feel free to ask any questions that you may have. But in the meantime, I just have a few more small details to share with everyone. So I wanted to point out that our support team at Edulastic is really amazing, and they always go above and beyond to answer any questions that you may have. And so for whatever reason, if you have follow-up questions to this webinar or just questions in general, you always can reach out to our support team. And the email for that is support@edulastic.com. maybe Ileana can share that in the chat. That would be awesome. And then the thing that you see on the screen here right now is our Edulastic Teacher Training Hub. And this is our resource page for things like this, things like webinars and trainings, and then any general help with Edulastic. Also on here, you'll find some teaching strategies and then some links to other Edulastic community things as well, like our Facebook page. So I really recommend checking out this. Possibly Ileana can share the link to this in the chat as well. The other thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that starting next week, we have a really exciting webinar series happening here at Edulastic. This is the first time that we're hosting this, and it's called Sail Through the Standards. It's a state test prep webinar series where we will be bringing on teachers from across the United States, and they will be sharing how they use Edulastic to prepare for state tests. And so the ones that you see on the screen right now are all of the ones that we have scheduled. And I really hope that you all will join us for those. Hopefully you see your state up there, and if not, shoot us a note and we will do our best to get your state scheduled. So again, we're really excited about those, and I'm hoping that Ileana can share the link to that in the chat as well. I know this is a lot of links, but there's a lot of exciting things going on at Edulastic right now. And then lastly, we can move on to questions. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. And I also want to point out, I know that there's a link to a resource page in there, but also our YouTube channel and our Twitter and our Facebook and our Instagram and our LinkedIn are all really great resources where you can both reach out to us, the employees at Edulastic, to make sure that you get your questions answered, and then also learn about any exciting updates that we have at Edulastic. That's always the first place that we post them, is via our social networks. So thank you again for joining us today. We will be staying online to make sure that any of your questions get answered. Oh yes, and Ileana, great point. She just said that we will be sharing the recording of this webinar on YouTube, and she just sent the link to our YouTube channel as well. And I also will be emailing this recording out to everybody who is here live. So thank you for taking the time out of your day.